So that was probably a better introduction than I can give. Our next speaker, Dave Lankes from Syracuse University, and some of you may know him as Virtual Dave. So we're looking forward to hearing from Dave and then asking our three speakers to come back to the front for a question-answer period. So I think, oh, that was quick. All right, Dave.
Hi, all. Actually, the funny story about self-portraits. We took my son to he takes karate. Always arming your children against you may not be the best idea. But we took him to a sort of stranger danger class at the dojo, and one of the things was, what does a stranger look like? You know, the idea being that you say, oh, they could be anyone. And so they say, oh, and what do they look like? Oh, big heads. Which one's big? Oh, what else? Big nose. Big nose. What else? Big mouth. Big mouth. What else? Lots of hair. And what else? Glasses. Glasses. Mean eyes. And I'm sitting there going, it's me! Anyway. Hi. So, what does the future hold for reference services? And it's always fabulous to have the arrogance to be willing to go with that title. So, what I'm going to do is my best. Because ultimately, the future will never be here. We're always living in the current. And so, having a direction, having where we want to go, having an idea about where we're headed is important. But the other thing is, whenever you ask that question, particularly in a scholarly context, you bring up things like theory and concept. Because if I were to ask you, what color will the cars be next year? You may think that's a very odd question, which is, well, how do we answer that until we get to next year? I don't build cars, I don't make cars. But let me ask you this question, what color will the dresses be during runway week in New York next year? And it turns out you'd say, well, that's the same kind of question, but it's not. You actually can tell that. And the way you know that is because 2 or 3 years ago, the dye manufacturers and the textile industry got together and determined what were the colors that they were going to produce lots of textiles in. And so that's the textiles that are going to be available to the designers. The designers are going to take those, make those into dresses, materials, clothes, and that's what's going to be going down the runway. So when you understand the underlying processes, you understand some of the underlying pressures, you can begin to predict future activity. So with that, what I'm going to try and do is talk a little bit about what I see as some of those underlying pressures. And I'm going to start by defining for you, in my view, what a librarian is. And I think that might seem self-evident, but to me, the same thing about saying what a librarian is, if you don't understand some of the underlying concepts and core concepts of where you're going, it becomes a harder question. All too often we have these questions, what is the future of reference, what is the future of cataloging, what is the future of this, what is the future of that? And we never step back and ask the more fundamental question, which is what are the forces driving us to make those decisions? So a joke, just for the heck of it. An academic library director calls their staff together and says, you know, times are tough, budgets are rough, we're going to have to make cutbacks, I just need to let you know that. And so an hour or two later, the director decides to sort of walk the floor and see how these things have hit, what the morale is, what people are doing. So she walks into the special collections area. And she sees all the librarians gathered around, pulling out old books and scanning them like crazy. What are you doing? Says the director. The staff says, well, we figure if we scan materials, we can make them easily available, we can build attractive things, show people what the collections are without them having to walk through, and we can use that to market. It's a great idea. Walks through into the collection development and acquisitions department and sees all these librarians clicking away on the computer saying, well, what are you doing? She says, well, we're checking prices on Amazon to see maybe if we go to the original source or another way of acquiring books, we can save money. That'll be helpful. It's great. The director then walks down into the sort of ready reference area and sees librarians running around, pulling books off shelves and ripping off the covers. What are you doing? Job security. And so, come on. So the point is that what made that the reference department? Was it the books and materials and ready reference, or was it the people? I would argue, of course, that it's the people. So when I define librarians, I want to give you my take on that. The first thing that defines librarians for me are that they're in the conversation business. That ultimately they're about building knowledge in the community, building knowledge in individuals, and this comes from learning theory, comes from conversation theory. It says knowledge is created through conversations. Those conversations can be one-on-one, those conversations can be group-to-group, those conversations are often within our own heads. Yes, us talking to ourselves, and here's my public reference librarian going, oh yeah, I've seen those conversations. But you know, when you're reading a book, you're not talking to the book. And you're certainly not talking to the author. You're talking to yourself. What do I take from this? What do I mean from this? What's the impact of this? And I don't just mean technicals and textbooks. I mean Catcher in the Rye. And fiction, all these things raise questions about who I am, what do I believe. So the first thing that for me defines a librarian is the business that we're in, which is the conversation business. The second thing that I use to define what a librarian is what we do in that knowledge building process. What is the role of a librarian in knowledge building? Because many people can say they're in that business. Teachers in classroom settings can say that. Parents, I hope, are in that business. Lots of people are in that business. But the way in which we facilitate those conversations, the role we play, is very important. So what are those roles? Well, if we're talking about conversation, the first role librarians have is access, getting people to that conversation. Right? So if you want to know what's going on in the physics community, turns out most of that's online because by the time it hits a journal, it's really archival material. So you need to be able to get the computer access, you need to be able to get to the journal, you need to be able to get to the book, access. I should also point out, however, that access is a two-way street, that we're not just getting you to other people's conversations, we're also getting other people to your conversations. And one of the things that we've talked about at the Free Library of Philadelphia is what happens when it's not about the Philadelphians going to learn about everything that's not Philadelphia, but everyone outside of coming to learn what is Philadelphia and what do they have, what's their unique knowledge. So access is the first means of facilitation. The second is baseline knowledge, which is it's great to say that it's online, but if you don't have basic computer literacy skill, or it's great to say it's in a database, but if you don't know how to search, you don't know how to get there. It's great to say it's a conversation, but it's in Spanish and you don't speak it. How can we provide that baseline knowledge? The third is a safe environment to do that in, because if I don't feel safe, I'm not going to contribute. And safety is not just physical safety, but it's intellectual safety. If I'm in an environment where I think people are chasing down logs and going to watch over my shoulders and such, I'm not going to be able to really build and expand that knowledge base. And the last one's motivation. And motivation is one that libraries and librarians have typical problems with, which is we sort of assume an intrinsic motivation. If they had the courage to come up to the reference desk, then we're halfway there. But we all know situations where that's not true. Go to ask the reference librarian this question. Go do this. Go to the library and do this assignment. And we need to understand what is it that we can do in terms of motivation. The last component that for me defines a librarian, because once again, we can find people who are facilitating conversations in this. Google. We do Blogger, we do searching, we do all these things. So the last thing to me that truly makes us into librarians are the values that we bring. What is it that we believe in those conversations? For example, the richer the conversation, the better the decisions, is a belief. The idea that we should allow free and open access is a value that we bring to it. The idea of providing multiple perspectives on a topic is a belief that we bring to it. So the sort of conversation and facilitation, think of that as the road driving down the car. The values are us saying that we will not drive on the sidewalk or hit other people. Right? So values are very important.